In today's episode of Remembering World War II, we'll discuss why Hitler attacked the West, but not the East, in December of 1944 in what's now known as the Battle of the Bulge, or the Ardennes Offensive. Come the fall of 1944, the window for Germany to grasp victory from the jaws of defeat was closing rapidly. In the East, the Red Army had repelled the Germans from its pre-war Soviet borders. Romania defected against the Axis powers in August of 1944, depriving Germany of its last major oil supplier. Bulgaria was occupied by the Soviets, the Russians were actively fighting in Hungary, in what was then Yugoslavia, the Soviets were temporarily partnering with Tito's partisan army after his appointment to prime minister and formally switching sides. There was a stalemate in northern Italy. France had been effectively lost, and perhaps the most catastrophic development was that in October, American troops gained a foothold in the German fatherland, crossing the border and occupying the ancient city of Aachen. This was the first major encroachment into pre-war German territory. So why then, given the dire situation facing Germany in late 1944, did Hitler decide to throw the very last of his reserves into a major offensive, and why did he decide to strike the Allies in the West? Hitler was deeply convinced that America's support for the war was waning and would only require a single epic demoralizing blow to crush the public's morale and force Roosevelt to abandon the war in Europe. America was a mixed nation of all nationalities and races after all, and that, in Hitler's mind, was a weakness. One that would be decisive, since no nation founded on such impure ethnic and racial foundations could be cohesive enough to withstand such a blow and see the war through to completion. Yes, he was to beat the Americans on the home front, and then with the Americans sidelined, the British would be too weak to continue fighting alone without their greatest ally standing them up. With the cessation of fighting on the Western Front, Germany could now reallocate all of her forces and concentrate her strength to repel the Bolshevik threat advancing in the East. There was agreement between Hitler and his top military advisors that the forces available to them in late 1944 would be satisfactory to conduct an offensive operation in the West. They would need 6 to 8 weeks to reorganize the Panzer divisions and activate the Volksgrenadier divisions. This was not possible in the East, however, given the vast scale of the war in Russia. An attack east simply would not register on the magnitude required to be impactful and would likely fizzle out after just a few short weeks, costing a substantial loss of heavy equipment and life. Upon his capture and interrogation by the Allies, Chief of the Operations Staff of the German Armed Forces High Command, Alfred Jodl, acknowledged, "The attack had to be launched west because the Russians had so many troops that even if we had succeeded in destroying 30 divisions, it would not have made any difference at all. On the other hand, if we destroyed 30 divisions in the west, it would amount to more than 1/3 of the entire invasion army." Now, with all eyes focused on the Western Front, what was to be the target of such an offensive? This is where the agreement between Hitler and his generals wavered. His generals were of the mind that a strike west should be a contained double pincer attack up to the Meuse River. With such an attack, the Wehrmacht could expect to regain critical lost territory and redraw the front along a much more defensible parameter. Hitler was convinced that the attack had to be much grander in scale in order to be effective. He was probably right. At this point in the war, he was acutely aware that the walls were caving in on the German Reich from the west, south, east, and the air. If he was to take the massive risk of fleecing his armies in the west and east to invest everything in one last offensive military campaign, then it had to be decisive. As the Allied bombers pounded German cities and factories day and night, the effects on Germany's war industry were inevitably felt. There were shortages of virtually everything, especially munitions, fuel, ball bearings, and workers. Contrarily, the Allies were pouring in supplies from their mulberries, captured ports such as Cherbourg, and as of November 1944, their now newly operational port of Antwerp. The disproportionate supply situation was an imminent threat. Failure to curtail the Allies' seemingly endless supply streams would make it impossible for Germany to survive in the near term. Therefore, Hitler confidently proclaimed that the target of this great campaign in the West was to be Antwerp. Thus, Operation Vachdanreine, or Vachdanreine, was born. To accomplish the aim of reaching Antwerp in a single offensive thrust, there were a few operational issues that needed to be solved. First, to achieve the rapid breakthrough, the Wehrmacht would need to strike a sector of the front that was thinly held by opposing enemy forces. This made the stretch of front between Aachen and Luxembourg an especially tempting target. According to German intelligence, centered approximately between these two cities was over 100 kilometers of thinly held American lines defending the Ardennes region. Along this front was a mixture of inexperienced troops such as the 99th and 106th Divisions. It also included battle-fatigued troops such as the 28th Infantry Division that was sent there to the quiet area of the front for recuperation and refitting. Another benefit of attacking here is that the thickly forested area extended all the way back to the German lines and provided the German forces with camouflage from enemy reconnaissance and aerial observations. A rapid breakthrough of this nature would give the German panzers the freedom of maneuver that they were so renowned for, and allow for the immediate capture of a bridgehead across the Meuse River. From here, German forces would continue their thrust northwest, bypassing major cities such as Brussels to capture Antwerp in a few precious days of fighting. Once Antwerp was recaptured, the time would be ripe for turning east and annihilating the encircled 20 to 30 enemy divisions. How would Hitler accomplish this plan with such limited AFVs, fuel, and men? Would capturing Antwerp give Hitler enough political capital to offer the Allies a negotiated peace deal? Stay tuned for the next episode of Remembering World War II, where we'll discuss the Ardennes Offensive and what could have happened if Hitler succeeded.